Welcome back to part 3 of Boolean operators. In this presentation, we're going to create statements using Boolean operators to meet some given criteria. So some chances to solve some problems and to get some practice before you move on to your challenge. So at the end of the last video, we barely saw this slide. I just want to go over this a little bit and use Boolean operators in various combinations. So let's look at these. If the sprite was touching an edge or we did not have the spacebar pressed, then this condition would be met. And you can see how we've got a Boolean operator within a Boolean operator. The hexagon fits inside. The hexagon of a Boolean operator fits inside another Boolean operator in the OR. If the sprite is touching the edge or the spacebar is pressed and the up arrow is pressed, then this condition would be true and we'd be able to move on. Or here's a not. If it's not touching the edge and also it's not touching the color white, then that condition would be true. So there's some examples of combining them. So let's take a look at some problem solving. And here's one to start. It's pretty easy. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to write out what it would look like, what the program would look like, what the Boolean operator and the condition would look like in order to make the sprite keep changing colors until the S key is pressed and the T key is pressed. So I want you to pause it and then we'll come back and check your answer. Okay, so hopefully you paused and you checked your answer. So let's take a look and see what this would look like. So let's look at the wording. The sprite should keep changing colors. So we have a repeat until the S key is pressed and the T key is pressed. S is pressed and T pressed. So it's going to keep doing that until this condition is met, and then it will move on to the next costume. And that's assuming that your next costume is a different color. So pause the video and solve this one. The sprite should rotate continuously when the space key is pressed or when touching the edge. Okay, welcome back. And let's take a look at your answer and see what one way to solve this. So the sprite should rotate continuously. So we need the forever loop when the space key is pressed or when it's touching the edge. Space bar is pressed or touching the edge, then the condition is met and it would keep churning. Here's the next one. When the sprite is not touching the edge, it should change colors over and over. When it is touching the edge, it should reset its color. Pause and try to solve, please. So here's your answer. So we've got in a forever block, if it's not touching the edge, if the sprite is not touching the edge, then it would change colors forever. If it is touching the edge, then it would reset its color to 0. So that meets the conditions right up here. When the sprite is not touching the edge, it should change colors over and over. And when it's touching the edge, it should reset. Okay, take a look at this one and try and solve it. Pause the video and then come back. The sprite should hide. There are 2 reasons it should hide. First, the sprite should hide if it touches the edge. Second, the sprite should hide if the space bar is pressed and it's touching the color blue. So we're going to wait. We're going to wait until it's touching the edge or the space bar is pressed and touching blue, and then the condition will be met, and then the sprite would hide. So wait until this happens, and then once it does, then your next block underneath it would be hide. Okay, so we have this command for waiting for a mouse click. What we want you to do is see if you can come up with a way to program this using Boolean logic and conditional statements. So pause that and see what kind of a program would you create to have an operation start on a click of the sprite. So here's one way you could solve this. If it's touching the mouse pointer and the mouse is down, once those 2 conditions have been met, that would be the same thing as a sprite click. So that's one way to solve that. So thank you for your attention, and hopefully this has given you some really good information on how to use Boolean operators within Scratch. And now you're going to use these for your challenge. And I wish you all the best, and let's get scratching.